Imagine this. You hire a cook for your family. She seems healthy, strong, quiet, hardworking. The children love her meals. Everything seems normal, until suddenly your daughter develops a fever. Then your son, then your wife. One by one, everyone in the house falls sick. Some recover, some don't. Doctors are confused. Nobody understands why disease keeps following this woman from house to house. Because she never looked sick, never coughed, never complained. Yet everywhere she went, people fell ill. This is the disturbing true story of Typhoid Mary, the woman accused of spreading death across New York, and the first person in American history to be forcibly quarantined for decades. But the strangest part? She may not have believed she had done anything wrong. The year is 1900. New York City is booming. Immigrants flood the city chasing opportunity. Streets are crowded. Wealth and poverty sit side by side. But beneath all the excitement of a growing city lurks something terrifying: disease. One of the deadliest killers at the time is typhoid fever. Today, many people barely think about it. But back then, typhoid was terrifying. Victims suffered crushing fevers, stomach pain, vomiting, weakness, and sometimes severe internal bleeding. In crowded cities with poor sanitation, outbreaks spread quickly and without mercy. Doctors understood that contaminated food and water often caused typhoid. But there was one thing medicine barely understood at the time. Some people could carry deadly diseases without ever becoming sick themselves. And one woman would become the most infamous example in history. Her name was Mary Mallon. Born in Ireland in 1869, Mary immigrated to America as a teenager, hoping for a better life. Like many immigrants, she worked hard to survive and eventually found stable work as a cook for wealthy families in New York. She was talented in the kitchen, and families liked hiring her. Cooking for rich households paid well, and Mary built a reputation as someone dependable. But strange things kept happening wherever she worked. Shortly after Mary arrived at one household, people began falling ill. Typhoid fever spread through the family. Then Mary quietly moved on to another home. And it happened again. Another house. Another outbreak. Then another. Family after family became mysteriously sick shortly after Mary arrived. It was almost as if disease itself followed her from one address to another. Yet nobody suspected the cook. After all, Mary looked perfectly healthy. She had no fever, no weakness, no symptoms at all. How could someone who wasn't sick be spreading disease? Then came the case that changed everything. In the summer of 1906, a wealthy family rented a luxurious vacation home in Oyster Bay, New York. Not long after moving in, disaster struck. 6 out of the 11 people living in the house developed typhoid fever. For wealthy families, this was shocking. Typhoid was often associated with poverty and poor sanitation, not luxury estates. The owner of the property panicked. If word got out that typhoid had broken out in the house, the property's reputation could be ruined. So he hired a sanitary engineer named George Soper to investigate. At first, Soper suspected contaminated water or sewage problems, but the house seemed clean. Nothing made sense. Then he noticed something unusual. A cook had recently worked there. Her name was Mary Mallon. Curious, Soper began investigating Mary's work history, and what he discovered was deeply unsettling. Everywhere Mary had worked, outbreaks seemed to follow. In one home, several family members became ill. In another, children died. Again and again, the same pattern appeared. Soper came to a terrifying conclusion. Mary herself might be the source. But here was the problem. Mary had never been sick a day in her life. At the time, the idea that a perfectly healthy person could spread deadly disease sounded almost impossible. Yet the evidence kept pointing back to her. Soper approached Mary and tried to explain his suspicions. He asked for samples so doctors could test her for typhoid bacteria. Mary exploded with anger. Imagine someone walking up to you and saying, "We think you're spreading a deadly disease," even though you feel completely fine. From Mary's perspective, it must have sounded ridiculous, insulting even. She believed she was being falsely accused. She refused testing. Some reports claim she chased Soper away with a carving fork. But health officials were alarmed. Authorities began tracking her down. When they finally found her, Mary reportedly tried to escape and even hid from officials. But eventually, they caught her, and what happened next felt less like medicine and more like an arrest. Against her will, Mary was taken to a tiny isolated place called North Brother Island, located in the East River near New York City. She was quarantined, alone, cut off from normal life. Doctors began running tests and eventually uncovered the truth. Mary carried Salmonella typhi, the bacteria responsible for typhoid fever. It lived in her body, likely in her gallbladder, allowing her to spread the disease through food she prepared, especially cold dishes like desserts, fruits, and ice cream that weren't cooked before serving. But Mary herself showed no symptoms. She had become what science now calls an asymptomatic carrier, someone capable of spreading disease without feeling sick. To public health officials, Mary represented a terrifying danger. To Mary, however, this felt deeply unfair. She insisted she had done nothing wrong, and in some ways she had a point. She never intended to hurt anyone. She genuinely didn't believe she was sick because she had never felt sick. But newspapers turned her into something else entirely. A villain. They gave her a name that would haunt her forever. Typhoid Mary. The public became obsessed with her story. Newspapers painted her as a dangerous woman carrying invisible death from house to house. Fear spread quickly. Yet here's something many people don't know. Mary wasn't the only healthy typhoid carrier discovered at the time. Authorities found others, but none became as famous, and none were treated quite like Mary. Still, officials feared releasing her, because every time she cooked, people got sick. After years in isolation, Mary finally convinced authorities to let her go. But there was one strict condition. She could never work as a cook again. At first, Mary agreed. But life outside quarantine wasn't easy. Cooking was the skill she knew best, and other jobs paid far less. Laundry work and cleaning barely covered expenses. Eventually, desperation or stubbornness pushed her toward a dangerous decision. Mary secretly returned to cooking. Only this time, she used fake names to avoid being recognized. And then, exactly what officials feared began happening again. Typhoid outbreaks returned. In 1915, disaster struck at a hospital in New York where dozens of staff and patients suddenly fell ill. More than 20 people became infected. Investigators traced the outbreak back to one person, the cook, using an alias. It was Mary. Again, this time, authorities had lost all patience. Mary was arrested and sent back to North Brother Island. And this time, there would be no second chance. She remained there for the rest of her life. Year after year, isolated from society, living as one of the most feared women in America. Mary Mallon died in 1938 after spending more than 2 decades in forced quarantine. But even now, history still debates her story. Was she reckless? Absolutely. Returning to cooking after repeated warnings put lives at risk. But was she also misunderstood? A poor immigrant woman trapped between fear, science, and survival, during a time when medicine barely understood what was happening. Possibly, because while Mary certainly spread disease, many historians argue she became something larger than reality, a symbol of public fear. Someone society could point to and blame. One thing, however, is impossible to deny. Mary Mallon changed medical history forever. Her case helped scientists understand that perfectly healthy-looking people could still spread deadly illnesses. A discovery that would reshape how outbreaks handled for generations to come. So the next time someone says, "But they don't look sick," remember the woman history never forgot. A woman who looked perfectly healthy, while leaving illness everywhere she went. Her name was Mary Mallon. But the world remembers her as Typhoid Mary.